Welcome to the Arabian Travel Market Tech Theatre. I'm John Strickland. I'm going to moderate this session. I'm from JLS Consulting in London. Thanks for joining us today. This is a third of our airline industry sessions today. We've had two this morning in the Arabian Travel Market main stage. And this afternoon our topic is the impact of innovation and technological change on the airline sector. Well, many of you will remember the days of having to go down to your local travel agent and ask for advice about booking tickets. Maybe calling an airline on the phone, looking through travel brochures. We didn't have the internet, we didn't know anything about that. Is that not close enough? Okay, is that better? If anybody can't hear, not just me, but anybody else, just shout, because here it's not obvious whether I can be heard or not. I can hear my own voice. But yeah, the days we used to have to go to travel agents, then struggle out to the airport, wait in check-in queues and all sorts of other queues. Nothing much to do at the airport once you've gone through security. Sitting on the plane, maybe with some plastic headphones to listen to a movie if you were lucky. And aircraft that were being used at those times, many of them are now retired or close to retirement. The whole process from start to finish has changed and is indeed in a state of change. So it's a good moment to look at innovation and technology in the sector along those lines from start to finish. And in the next hour that we have, there's a chance for you to ask questions to any of the panelists. I've got experts around me to overcome my lack of expertise in this topic. So I'll just introduce them now and then we'll hear a bit from them. First of all, to my far left is Mike Ferguson, who's Senior Business Development Manager for Skyscanner. So welcome, Mike. Mike has flown in from Scotland, from Edinburgh, right? To be here in Dubai. Yep. Next to Mike, flying in from Germany, we have Sarah Wittlieb from Corporate Development, Head of Innovation Management at Munich Airport. Sarah's flown in to be with us today, and I've not met Sarah before, but she came highly recommended, and so I'm not going to build you up too much, but well recommended in technology when it comes to the airports. And to Sarah's right, from the local hometown airline, I've got it wrong way around in my list. I've got to go the wrong way around. It's not hometown at all. No. We have Gronja Vandenberg, who is Head of Marketing Middle East for Airbus. And then, coming back to my order, to my immediate left, hometown airline Emirates, but not a hometown guy, although he probably lived here a few years. We have Jochen Hirsch, who is VP Business Intelligence and Commercial Systems from Emirates. And finally, to my right, who has flown in from Seattle. It seems people have been clocking up the miles to get here. We have Blake Emery, who is Director Differentiation Strategy from Boeing Airplanes. So welcome, Mike. Well, without any more time spent with me talking, I'd now like to take us through that journey that I talked about, from booking to flying and looking into the future with all my panelists. So I'd like each of them to tell us a little bit about their particular area. So we start from the process by which we look at making bookings. Can we turn to you, Mike? Tell us in a few minutes about Skyscanner. How did you emerge? What is your mission in life?
Okay, sure. So Skyscanner is a global travel search engine. It's more famous for its flights. You may or may not know that we also do car hire and hotels too. It started off back in 2003, and it was founded by three friends, one of whom is still the chief executive. His name is Gareth Williams. Excuse me. And it started off because he had problems, he had challenges finding the requisite flights for his ski holidays. So he wrote a bit of code to scan the wider internet and dropped it onto a very simple spreadsheet, and that was Skyscanner. So fast forward 13 years, it's now a website with 50 million unique visitors per month, 40 million app downloads. It's available in 30 languages, 70 currencies. And yeah, it's a typical meta search model. So we carry content across all three of those verticals: hotels, car hire, and flights. And the user will undertake a search that will be presented with pretty much full market visibility on across those products. And when the user decides which one they want to book, they hit the book button and they exit out onto the downstream partners. That could be Emirates, it could be Expedia, it could be whoever else we're working with. So it's a flight. It started off as a flight comparison engine, has morphed into more of a broader travel search site. And my responsibility specifically within Skyscanner on our B2B arm. So B2B for Skyscanner is two things really. One, it's powering the travel internet. That's our vision from a B2B perspective. Anybody who has a website who wants to offer travel to their users and their consumers, we're happy to offer up our technology our data through world-class APIs and white labels. So some examples. We work with pre-launch products from startups right the way through to global brands like MSN. If you go onto MSN and you'll see they've got a flight on the travel channel, you'll see they have flights and car hire. That's Skyscanner data you're using. So whether or not you've directly used Skyscanner yourselves, there's a fair chance you have accessed and had the benefit of the Skyscanner data at some point in your travels. The other element of Skyscanner B2B is the data. So if you consider what those 50 million unique visitors per month are doing on Skyscanner, millions and millions and millions of searches, that data is all collated. So what we have is real-time, almost real-time data on who's travelling where, who's trying to travel where, and it can paint a really rich picture of the travel landscape. So I think that's probably enough as an overview. Back to you, John.
Great, yeah, thanks, Mike. We'll come back to you because it's really shifting the dynamics of that whole booking process. So
absolutely.
Let's assume we've made our booking, we've decided how to travel, we've researched our flight, and we've gone off to the airport. We're getting a very different experience in leading airports around the world today than the one we did in the past. So, Sarah, can you tell us a bit about how things are changing in airports, not least at Munich?
Yes, of course. So why customer experience and why now? Actually, because we have entered the age of the customer. Being a customer-oriented enterprise at the moment is more important for success than ever. In times, especially of overstimulation, value for the customer can only be added through creating real emotions and individualization. So, dear colleagues and dear audience, at Munich Airport, we are really convinced of the approach that the customer rates his journey in a common sense and not like different kinds of single products or steps. For him, it's just a whole journey. So therefore, we as Europe's first 5-star airport decided to include all parts of it, starting at the passenger's home, for example, at the booking, and ending, of course, at his destination. So for us, the best customer experience is not only a question about the fulfillment of his basic needs, like signage or luggage delivery. So in order to enthuse our customers, we want to positively really surprise them. And actually, we realize that by innovations. So together with my team, I'm in charge of the complete process, like from the trend scouting, idea generation, to the realization of pilot projects together with startup companies, not only from Germany, but also, for example, from the US or from different parts of the world. And we also in charge of that until we get a final decision after the pilot trial and error. So after the top management, after a certain trial time, and then about the future handover of the product. And sometimes we will give it over to the line organization, and sometimes it's just to say a lesson learned success. So let me give you some examples about our innovations we currently just developed. So imagine you are longing for a new travel experience. So at Munich Airport, we already pick you up at home. This means we just developed an own travel blogging. So they give you an advice on your next destinations and about where you can go directly from Munich Airport. And you get tips about sightseeing, the hotels, what you can do there, of arts, parties, everything what's going on there. So, and in order to meet the customer needs, of easy and really convenient traveling, we recognize that the digitalization is really, really important for us. So, especially for our business model. And this is why we developed our own digital department at Munich Airport, and they are responsible for development of innovative digital services along the whole customer journey, not only at the airport. So to give you an example, we just developed our 360-degree indoor navigation maps to navigate through the airport. If you want to, you can already do it at home to see how do I get from the parking to the check-in, to the boarding, and so on. And you can also book your parking space, for example, online before.
Sarah, I'm just going to stop you there because I want to come back and go into a bit more detail on that. But very interesting so far. We'll come back on some of those points. Not to be rude to you, Grania, but just to keep my order of sequence. The next thing we do once we've got to the airport is board a plane. Hopefully, if it's at Munich, it'll be leaving on time on Emirates. So then we're over to Jochen in Emirates. You're an airline. You're not an old airline, but you are an airline of 30 years standing. And I know when we chatted on the phone, you're talking about reinventing Emirates, really using technology in ways perhaps we never imagined or maybe weren't available before. Tell us a bit about what you're up to in the airline.
So we're certainly not an old airline, but we're not a young airline either. We're now 30 years old. We're I'm probably assume you know Emirates. It's now the largest international carrier. We have 250 airplanes flying, largely a mix of 777 and A380s. We've been growing for the last 30 years at around 15 to 20%. And always really have been pushing industry boundaries in terms of customer service, in terms of the product that we offer, in terms of the technology that we adopt both on the ground and in flight. We were one of the first to offer personal screens in economy, offer in-flight mobile phones, offer IFE and Wi-Fi on the plane. All our A380s are now Wi-Fi equipped. So it's really pushing the boundaries continuously. Yet we see a lot of things happening around us, especially in the last couple of years, where you have a lot of digital disruptors entering industries they really didn't have anything to do with. They don't have any inventory. Yet someone like Airbnb can completely disrupt how the hotel business operates. They don't have any real assets. Yet you have someone like Uber entering the taxi and transport business, completely disrupting how the industry used to work, simply by offering a peer-to-peer service. And as a whole travel industry, we really need to think hard about how we are taking advantage of the technologies going forward. And I make a wild guess, but there's no industry or there's no airline in this industry that doesn't have to adjust to these technological challenges, these technological opportunities. And that's why we embarked around roughly 3 years ago on a journey to say, how can we as Emirates leverage what we see in terms of technology, the mobile waves of everyone having a smartphone and a smart device being just one of the key drivers. Now all of a sudden you can communicate and connect with someone and connect them to the brand with a touch of a button. How do we actually take advantage of that? Just creating an app is not enough. And we embarked on that journey to really say, how do we need to change as an airline? How can we disrupt ourselves before someone comes into our industries and disrupts us by offering a peer-to-peer service? There was an interesting statement from the Roots conference where the Finnair CEO said, I don't want Google to come in and purchase capacity in the airline market and we just become the supplier of that capacity. Yet they have the brand power and they have the connection to the customer of delivering the experience. And that's exactly going in the right direction. How can we as the airline community actually ensure that we have the right distribution vehicle and connection vehicle to connect personally with every single customer and provide an end-to-end experience?
Excellent. Great introduction, Jochen, from Emirates' point of view. Well, once we've got on board our Emirates plane, we find ourselves either on a Boeing or an Airbus aircraft, and the aircraft themselves have been changing the dynamics about what airlines are able to do today. So let's go to the two manufacturers. So, Grania, starting with you in Airbus, where does all this technology and innovation impact what you're doing, and how is it changing?
Thanks, John, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Is that okay? You guys can hear me?
Can you hear all of us okay? Because we can't hear ourselves very well.
Okay.
We need more
Is
volume.
that better?
More volume.
That's better, okay. So let me get straight to the point. For Airbus, innovation is something that's extremely important. If you go back about 40 plus years when we were trying to enter the aircraft manufacturing environment in the marketplace, there were already established and very successful players in the field. So we had to do something new just to be noticed. So I would say that that's exactly what we did, and right from the start we had this innovation spirit, if you like, within the company. Back at that time we were bringing in new technologies such as the first twin-engine wide-body aircraft or the first two-man cockpit, and fly-by-wire technology today, which is still a cornerstone of aircraft design. So that spirit of aviation has stayed with us right from the beginning. It served us well. It's how we started to build our customer base and enjoy the success that we have today. And that's something that we've kept with us and we need to go forward with. So at Airbus we have to think about two different things. We've got our customers, that's the airline. We're a B2B business, and it's the airlines that are really driving us and driving our innovation forward. They want more efficient airplanes at the end of the day. You need to fly from A to B with the least cost possible and the most revenue possible. So that's one of our main drivers. And the second one is, of course, the passenger, the traveling public. we need to be able to provide to the airline the right platform for them to be able to customize that cabin and respond to their passenger needs. So it's a never-ending story. We continue to drive forward. And I think it's probably important to note that for an aircraft product, it's not at all like a mobile phone. I mean, 12 months later, your mobile phone is obsolete. An aircraft remains in production for decades, 30 years, sometimes more. So we have two levels of innovation, if you like. You have the bigger breakthrough innovations, such as the high level of composite technology on an A350, and then you have smaller innovations which you're bringing onto aircraft that are in production. So, for example, if you take the A320 and A330neo families today, where we take an existing platform and bring today's level of technology to that aircraft. So, as we were saying, it's the customers, it's the airline that's very important in driving us, but also ourselves, the traveling public.
Thanks very much, Grania. And Blake, the rivals of Airbus, you two are the big guys in the world of aviation. What's your perspective on all this technological change?
Yeah, I can put it into a little bit of perspective. My own personal area of expertise is with the flying public, the traveling experience for the flying public. So from the standpoint of the airframer, just to put it in perspective, what is our domain? What do we get to play with when it comes to the flying experience? So the airframer pretty much gets to play with the ceiling, the bins, the sidewalls, the window reveals, and the lighting. Okay, that's pretty much it. Most of the other things is kind of up to airline choices and airline decisions. And like Rand said, those particular decisions we make kind of last for a number of years. Just to put innovation into a little bit of perspective, or the way that I like to look at it, is I see innovation as it's bringing some technology that already exists, but you're using it in some kind of a new or novel way, as opposed to invention, which is something that would be totally new. So, for example, you take something like, like there existed a technology in glassware that as it got more sunlight, it would get dimmer. So you have the concept of dimming glassware, and so, but you didn't have that on an airplane. So you bring that into the dimmable windows as an example on the 787, and that's a good example of kind of the way we look at innovation.
Right. Okay. Want to say anything more at the moment, or?
No.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, then, Blake. Yeah, so we've got the picture of what is going on with from the beginning of the booking right through to the flying and looking to the future. Coming back over to the beginning, Mike, I mean, I was interested in what Jochen said about digital disruptors. Is Skyscanner a digital disruptor?
Potentially. It's certainly changing the way that people interact with the buying cycle. I think, if you look at the way people used to book travel, you mentioned earlier, John, that it was travel agents and it was going into the airline's high street shop. So that's changed, right? But what hasn't changed is people are still using travel agents. They're just online travel agents. People are still using airlines. They're just interacting with the airline's website. One of the key drivers for that is obviously the internet. So when I first started working in the internet back in about year 2000, there was debate as to whether or not the internet was going to take off. I think we're beyond that, right? So the internet works. It's been mass adopted. But there's a lot of changes within the internet, and there's a lot of different facets to it. So the three key themes that I'm going to call out here are, there's mobile. Somebody mentioned mobile earlier on. But then within mobile, you've got voice technology, and you've also got chatbots. So just to go back a little bit, if you talk about mobile, to give you some context as to how well adopted it is for travel search, 59% of our searches on Skyscanner are from a mobile device, and 43% of all bookings are on a mobile device. We see 2/3 of our users browsing online using their mobile, but completing the booking on a desktop. And so there are some regional variances to that. APAC, there's a higher adoption of mobile for commerce. US is a bit behind in that respect, but there's some decent averages in there.
Can I just jump in there, Mike?
Yeah.
I mean, you said about regional variations, and I painted a simple story that we've all changed our habits, but not all cultures are at the same space in the world, and not all age groups. You have oldies like me who are just struggling into this technological age. How wide-reaching is it in that sense, geographically and age?
So geographically, it's absolutely global. We have, of our 50 million unique visitors, we touch every part of the globe, more or less. In terms of age group, again...
Close to the mic.
Sorry. Is that okay? Yeah. In terms of age group, again, we have regular feedback and we display it around our office just to keep everyone focused on things. And we have regular feedback from people in their 80s who are using Skyscanner. So, if you're old enough to travel and young enough to travel, Skyscanner prides itself on having a suitable user interface that is pretty simple.
That surprises me. But I can see Sarah's nodding. Is that something you found through airports too? Because I'm tending to think, well, the older generation is maybe excluded, and the more we automate and the more we digitalize, the harder it's going to be for them.
So last year we did an open innovation workshop with the so-called silver generation. So we invited them to Munich Airport and we asked them, so what do you think about what's happening at the airport? How do you think about using your own digital devices? Do you use them? What do you use? And for us it was also really surprising because most of them said, of course we use them and of course we have an iPhone or things like that, but they want to have both. They want to be the one to decide whether they do it online or they have still the possibility to talk to a real person. So we decided at Munich Airport to do a combination then. So they get the possibility to talk to people. We have so-called airport helpers, people walking around just with an iPad and help other people, like with questions of where to go, wayfinding, things like that. But they also get the possibility in terms of course to use our digital channels we have,
Because, that human interaction, if I just think of myself as a person, I like human interaction. A lot of my work is at home, behind the computer screen. So on some days that I'm not out, somewhere like Dubai, which is not very often, I want to get out of the house and have some interaction with a shopkeeper, go and buy some potatoes or something. I don't want to go and stand up at one of those automated machines and scan the potatoes. I want to speak to somebody because it's fun. Yeah. In an airport, it seems to me, there are times when it's a hassle to stand in queue, to check your bag in, to get through the security line. Yeah. But do we all really want to just go, swipe everything, everywhere, get on that plane, and never speak to a person?
Yeah. So actually, in terms especially of security and safety, of course we have to improve that system. But at the other point, I'm really happy, thankfully, that it's not a question of what every single airport does. It's more a question about B2B cooperation and how to deal with the different authorities and nations. So I think it's very important that they get stronger in cooperation in terms of that, especially safety, security. But what we can do is we can think about terms of seamless travel. So in which, for example, if you imagine standing, for example, a security check and you get, during that time, you start to go there, you get the information. Now you have to wait 5 minutes. You can go now there, or you have to wait a longer time. Please, if you're interested, go to a restaurant or do something different. So I think the question is only to give the customer the right information for him, like mass customized, at the right time. And this is something we can do as an airport.
Okay. And Jochen, you were the guy who mentioned about digital disruptors. If you see entrepreneurs like the team from Skyscanner coming along, is that part of what you're looking at? Do you see that either as a threat they could take over part of what you'd like to have in your own hands, or they could complement what you're doing as part of this reappraisal of your future-proofing?
No, I think Skyscanner, at the moment is just another distribution channel, right? Mm-hmm. I think it adds a lot of customer value by having meta search engines combining different value propositions, facilitating the selection process. In the end, it's all about, does it make it easier for the customer or not? I think as an industry, we need to move away from how can we squeeze $1 more out of the customer or the passenger, rather than saying, what can I do within my own ecosystem to really add value and improve experience and make it as seamless as possible. Especially in the travel industry where you sort of have a disintegration of one service proposition, where you hop basically from one service entity to another. We are already working very closely with the Dubai airport, but it's still not seamless. How can we actually make that more seamless? That's sort of the whole conversation. And how can we understand our customers more? So at the core essence of building a digital capability is asking yourself, what are your core competencies today? What are your core capabilities? And how can you apply technology, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics? How can you facilitate to make the customer experience more seamless? How can you tailor customer experiences so that you actually answer to different behaviors and different demands of different demographic or different nationalities, respond to them in a very personalized way and guide them, whether it's through the booking process or through the travel experience, through the airport, guide them along the way in a very intuitive way. And I think that's what the core essence is, really looking at the technology, how can we apply that across the customer value chain. And you look at things like biometrics. The airport of the future, I shouldn't have to have any interaction if I don't want to, right? The key complaint we get from frequent business travelers is, I don't want to have to queue to check in. I don't want to have to queue for security. I travel every second day. The technology exists today that we can identify where is someone. We can identify as soon as he enters the terminal. We can recognize him through either his device ID or through his face or through his iris scan. The technology is available, yet it's so prohibitively complicated to apply it across the service chain to provide one seamless experience. So I don't think it's too far away that we actually start recognizing individuals as they come into the terminal. They just walk by the check-in desk, and instead of having 200 check-in desks, you only have 5, because 95% of the people will just walk through. Ideally, your bag will have been picked up at home already, or you just drop it off somewhere, already tagged. You're going to have a smart tag that's automatically getting its barcode sent through the internet as soon as you make the booking. It's just going to be wait and it's going off. You're not going to bother with security, because the machine recognizes you, locks you out, and you just walk through. You're going to walk through the terminal to the gate in a very tailored and customized way, because the intelligence would be there that we like, that you usually go for coffee. We know that your wife would have a birthday 2 days from now, so you want to pick up something at the jewelry store, say. So tailoring the experience to really someone very specific. It's mass personalization at scale. Emirates is flying around 55 million passengers a year. Doing that for every one of the 55 million passengers can only be done through technology and through understanding behaviors and characteristics and demands of each one of us. The key is to do that in consent with the passengers, right? Not to sort of cross the creepy line of we gather all the data and then we offer something you may not even want.
I was going to say, because people don't want to feel like it's a big brother kind of snooping on them or spying on them.
I think we're in a very interesting phase, right? We're not the millennium generation that grows up with the complete understanding that technology is around us. We're in a different generation yet everyone who grew up with Facebook, who grew up with Twitter and YouTube, they have a very different attitude towards sharing personal details. So we have to deal with a different mindset as well, and the recognition that people are happy to share personal details if it adds value to them. And that needs to be the clearly defined space, right? Where we also give access of data ownership back to the customer. You can basically see what we know about you and can judge for yourself whether it actually adds any value or not. We had very strict legal legislations being passed just last week in Europe, where it's very strict about what data you use and how you use it. Companies, airlines can be charged up to 4% of their annual turnover if they do something they shouldn't be doing. So there are very strict legal applications of that as well. So we need to find the right mix between using data in a very value-adding fashion,
privacy,
together with the customer.
Fantastic. And Gráinne, in terms of the aircraft, you made the point about the innovation being in 2 levels, one with the airline customers and the other in terms of passenger, our own experience travelling. Can I ask you, and then I'll come to Blake on the other side, can I ask you just to give us a couple of comments about what have the big step changes in technology done? I'm talking about new engines, carbon composites in the way that you're using in the 350 done in terms of what airlines are capable of doing network-wise.
Sure. Let's start with.
Get closer to the mic again.
Yep. Let's start maybe with the smaller aircraft family, the A320 family. So the A321 is the largest member of that small aircraft family. And today, well, very soon, it's flying in test today. The A321neo will be in the marketplace. So thanks to new engine technologies and thanks to some aerodynamic tweaks and some weight savings that go onto that aircraft, it's an aircraft that saves the customer 20% of fuel burn over every trip that they make. So, you know, and at the same time, we've been increasing the revenue space of the aircraft. So if you combine the fuel burn saving along with the increased seats that can be achieved in that aircraft, you're talking about, you know, $2 million per aircraft per year. So that's quite a significant saving that at the end of the day should, you know, passes through to the airlines and ultimately passes through to ticket price. But more interestingly, for this aircraft, it's an aircraft now with some increased max takeoff weight, increased fuel capacity, and that aircraft can fly 4,000 nautical miles. So you're talking about bringing to the market a single-aisle aircraft that's entering, if you like, traditionally wide-body routes, but with the economics of a single-aisle aircraft. So if you think about this region in particular, that's an aircraft that will now go into Europe, all the way to London. It will go down to South Asia. It'll go into China. So it brings to the airlines the opportunities to increase their markets and to bring more prospects for their customers. So not only in a more fuel-efficient way, but just to broaden their horizons as well. So it's changing the way that the airline's business model can work.
Okay. And Blake, the 787, the Dreamliner with Boeing, you know, one of the thoughts behind that was it would, in some ways, as Grani was saying, in the upcoming aircraft, was going to open up more long, thin routes. Has it done that from a technological point of view?
Yeah, that's really a great question. I'd say that the 87 did that. It actually exceeded our expectations as far as opening up the long, thin routes, because there have been over 100 new city pairs that have been that the 87 has been used on now, and as it turns out, about a third of them have been the long, thin routes, but also for many of the same reasons that Gran mentioned. It's just the technology that it brought to bear did enable the fuel savings, etc. And fuel savings is fuel savings, whether it's long, thin routes or medium routes or short routes. So it's really interesting to me what the innovation of the composites has brought to the table, because composites have been around for a long time. I mean, they've been around in the aerospace industry for a long time. But for both the A350 and the 787, the extensive use of the composites was really what the innovation was.
It's become a majority, hasn't it? Majority components.
Oh, absolutely. And even though the two airframers have two completely different ways of constructing the airframe with the composites, if you look at it from the standpoint of the passenger experience, what the composites enabled has been incredible. For example, the larger, higher windows on the 787. With the composites, you don't need to have a heavy window belt. So you're able to have bigger windows without the same issues that you can potentially have with a metal airframe. The idea of the fact that the composite is it doesn't matter what the humidity is. Okay, so it allows you to set the humidity level at a level that's going to be more humane and more better for the passengers inside.
I was going to ask you about that, because I've not yet been on a 787 or indeed a 350. I'm expected to go on a 787 later this year, but I was at a conference the other day, an airline airport conference, and speaking to a colleague, and he said, oh yeah, I went on this British Airways flight to Calgary from London on a 787, and I felt very different in a better way. It's amazing.
It's amazing. And probably, again, the composites is one of the things that enabled that, because another thing you're able to do with the composites is you're able to pressurize the vessel more so that it's flying at effectively an altitude that's closer to sea level, 6,000 feet as opposed to 8,000 feet. I mean, you can do this on an aluminum airframe as well, but it's just easier for the composite. Right. It doesn't care to what extent you pump it up, and that additional pressurization so that you've got the effective lower atmosphere is probably one of the biggest things that helps the passenger feel better, and we hear those stories all the time.
Now, Jochen, from an airline perspective, it's just coming out of your current remit, but you are already a user of some of this technology. I say some because the very newest, the 787, the 350 Emirates doesn't have as yet. I think you did have an order for 350s, which you've cancelled, but I think Sir Tim has indicated you could be in the running again for one of the next generation aircraft. Does what Grenier and what Blake are claiming, does that ring true for you as an airline, the difference this makes, both for you in bottom line financial terms and secondly for your flying customers?
Absolutely. I mean, Emirates has always been one of the key drivers, both with Boeing and Airbus, in developing products. And the bigger the airline has grown, the more important it became. Luckily, the more we got listened to. Inherently, with the diverse mix of airlines in the industry, there are very widening differences in which an aircraft can be designed. We are very close on the development process and the actual design process. And hence the products
we enjoy that collaboration a lot.
That is good. No, it's a very healthy exchange of sort of supply and demand. And the outcome of years of work is really a product that comes with the customer in mind, that is not coming out of an engineering department, but through close collaboration. And I think that's the case for a lot of airlines who got more involved far earlier in the design process than it was maybe 20 years ago. The products coming onto the market are more mature from a customer experience point of view. And that mirrors in the feedback that we get from customers. So one example is the A380, which surely is a milestone in aviation history, but it's not that new anymore. Yet everyone still looks at it once it lands somewhere, and it's still turning heads. And it's now in service for 9 years. We put it in service in August 2008, so it's in service with Emirates for 8 years. By no means a new aircraft, yet the feedback that we still get from customers is fantastic. Not only because we have a fantastic onboard product in there, with the spa shower in first class, with the bar and the lounge area in business class, but also because the aircraft has been designed with the customer in mind. It's extremely quiet. Customers do notice a difference when they board an A380 or whether they come off a different flight. They do notice a difference, the spaciousness. So there are a lot of aspects to it that really fare well with the customers.
Just coming back to you, Mike, on that point, airlines in the past created GDS, Global Distribution Systems. They were, I think, ultimately seen as Frankenstein's monster. The airlines created them, then they sold them, only to be bitten by them, by big fees, and not only the cost. They complain that these systems only show product A versus product B in terms of this is a flight, this is a price. If we think about all these great things we're hearing about the experience with Boeing, with Airbus, with Emirates uses and delivers as an airline, is this something that you would work with in Skyscanner to go beyond that old way of just a price and a journey time? Can you show more of the attributes that go beyond that in terms of what the customer can expect?
Yes, it's something we're focusing very heavily on at the moment. So as it stands, our airline partners and our OTAs, the content they're able to share on Skyscanner is pretty limited to price, fundamentally. There are advertising options, there's inline native adverts that allow the advertiser to be more creative and to sell the experience more than simply the price. However, facilitated booking is something that we're working on. So I say historically and traditionally the user ends up on Emirates or wherever to complete the booking. Facilitated booking will allow the user to actually complete the transaction on the Skyscanner website, which allows the airline to create a far more diverse product suite. So instead of just showing the lowest price, they're able to add upgrades, they're able to add meals, luggage, all that sort of additional stuff, and therefore what the airline's able to do is sell the service in addition to the actual price. So that's something that's new to Skyscanner. It's live with about 7 or 8 partners at the moment, but we're rolling out at scale. So you'll see that increasing significantly over 2016 into 2017.
And another thing in terms of what you're doing that is quite innovative technology, and I met one of your colleagues only 2 days ago at an airline industry conference. The data that you're picking up about people looking, not necessarily booking, but looking at a possible journey, maybe a journey that doesn't even exist, that you can't do from your hometown to where you want to go, and possibly selling that to airlines or to airports to give a better idea about what the future could be?
Absolutely. So that's the travel insights data that we offer out in the marketplace. So what that tells us is, so there's an initiative, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with ANA Aero. We've got an initiative running with them, which is the unserved route of the week at the moment. So a good example of that is Barcelona to Seoul. Nobody serves that route at all. In 2015, there was 375,000 searches for a product or a service that didn't exist. So that applies right across the globe. We know what our users are looking for, and we can then create a data set to advise airlines where the opportunities exist for expansion.
Is that something that would be of interest to you as an airport, Sarah? Maybe your colleagues in terms of route development?
Yeah, we already discussed that before we started here.
Okay.
Because actually at the moment we are developing together with other airports a new seamless travel app. And because we decided that for us there's no longer a sense just to have one single app for one airport, because we know that the people are more interested not only until they leave the airport, they are more interested until they really arrive at their destination. And what we do with them at first is a trial, and then we will get the feedback, and then we will talk with different airports and also with other partners, like for example Skyscanner, also with the airlines, how we can combine that, because I think the times where the people are interested in downloading like 20 apps per week or something, those are over. And
is that more for tech geeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the question is more which kind of devices or, for example, wearables are going to use then in the future, and how we can deal with that kind of situation then, just in order to give the information at the right time for the right person.
Sorry, John, on the app theme. Yeah, I mean, when smartphones and smart devices first emerged, everybody had pages and pages and pages of apps. What we're seeing now is increased adoption of smart technology, fewer apps per device, and I don't know if anybody else agrees, but that certainly seems to be the trend. And what that then leads to is how do you get your app, or how do you get your content distributed to your users when they're less free and easy with their app choice? So you might well have noticed recently that KLM have launched a chatbot within the Facebook Messenger system. So that's the first airline, and the phrase that Facebook used, Marcus, when he announced this, was that KLM are the first airline. Very strong intonation there that there's going to be mass adoption again on that front. So with Facebook, there's 900 million people using Facebook Messenger, and we really do believe that technology, integrating technology from airlines, from airports, from all sorts of services, is going to increase dramatically within existing platforms.
Right, thanks, Mike. And Jochen, in terms of this data, in two respects. One, your relationship with your customers, and secondly, how you plan your network. Are the kind of things we've just been hearing there going to influence the shape of the network as well as the customer interaction? To give you a second question, where does big data fit in that, and what is big data?
So from a network planning perspective, I think that the data from searches is quite interesting. It would complement what we already have, which is critically used for the decision making and network planning, which is the actual booking data or the ticketing data that we get from the industry bodies and the global distribution systems. It's basically one step after someone has done a search and has then booked a flight and has flown, we can truly understand what was a true origin and destination of that passenger, where did he connect, what options did he have, what were the most likely reasons why he chose one hub over the other. So that analysis is done in detail, and that gives us a very good understanding of customer behavior. But it's all indirect, because you rely on someone else giving you booking data that facilitates your analytical process. The key about all of this, also big data talks around how do we get closer to the customer. Having different distribution channels is great and one thing, but from an airline point of view, we can't service our customer properly if there's always a trade barrier in between, and whether that's an OTA, a meta search, or the actual trade industry. We actually need to get to the bottom of what our customer wants and needs are, and only when we have these data aspects, then we really can start tailoring the experience for these individual passengers. So we embarked on a project around 18 months ago where we started building a data lake. We collected anyone and anything that touches our systems in the earlier days, we used to dump the information of a booking that got discarded or cancelled. We keep that information. We start tagging every single customer hitting our system, whether he cancels that booking or not. Next time he enters our system, we know him. And by doing that, we start building intelligence about every single individual, about his behaviors, about his reasons for travel, about understanding of what particularities he has, where he doesn't want to fly, where he travels for leisure, where he travels for business, who he travels with, which companions he's traveling with. So understanding really what are the patterns to allow far more direct marketing communications with that person and to provide that seamless experience. As I said before, it's not about squeezing out the last dollar to the customer, rather than providing a value that is actually making sense to each one of us. Probably you know as much as I do how many emails you get that are actually quite irrelevant, although you often think someone should know better. But even Amazon, up to this point in time, Amazon probably being one of the key big data organizations driving analytics to the edge at the moment, I still am yet to receive an email or an offer, whether online or through email, that really I feel talked to. It's still based on previous searches. If I was unlucky and I searched for a present for my mom's birthday, I'm getting pitched that for the next 3 weeks, whether I have bought it or not. So it's really to the core understanding of the customer, and from a data aspect, building that genome around customer analytics. By 2020, around 6 billion people will have a smartphone. 6 billion people you could talk to individually, in theory. 80 to 90% of those people will be connected with high-speed internet. So that's your target market, a market that basically didn't exist before. Someone in Guangzhou that had to go to a travel agent to book a ticket to travel to London, for example, could do that in the new world all digitally and be recognized for who he is and what he needs. So from a big data aspects, gathering the data, aggregating it, consolidating it, understanding it, really gives the true power. And that's where, going forward, Gartner, the advisory firm, expects that by 2018, so in just 2 years' time, organizations will not compete on product and service anymore. They will compete on their capability to use data and to turn advanced analytics principles into insights, into action, into relevance.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point here about the data analytics and the big data, because at the stage it's at now, it's really good at giving you insights into your consumer behavior and what they actually do. And that has some value. And for me, and for what I'm trying to do inside the airplane, it doesn't have that much value, because I don't really care. I mean, of course I care what people do, and I'm way more interested in why they do it. And I want to design to that, not the what.
Well, I wanted to ask you that question because the 787, I think you were very involved on the customer side. Talked about the big windows, the better pressurization, humidity experience. How did you do that? Was that still much more at a human level, getting people around a table?
Yeah, we use some very specific methods to get deeper inside the brain, to understand the deeper psychological needs that people have when they're in the psychological condition that we call inside an airplane or flying. And you can't do that with the focus group. You can't do that with, a direct question or a simple survey. You just don't. I mean, you'll get an answer. You ask someone a question, you'll always get an answer, but can you use that answer? And I mean, what would be the value right now of surveying a bunch of economy class passengers about what they want to be different in their airplane? We already know the answer. It's always going to be the same thing in economy class. At least it has been for the years and years that I've been in the industry. Give me more room. Give me more space. So why do you need to do more research to discover that? We know it, right? So you got to find out something different. You need to find out the unarticulated needs, and you really need specialized techniques with that. You need to use methods that get people out of the part of their brain where they're trying to help you out.
So if you don't use focus groups, how do you do it?
So you do use groups of people, but just for example, you might, for example, when we were working on the windows and trying to determine within our next new airplane interior where the windows should be in the fuselage and how big they should be and what shape they should be. We did all that research without ever asking a single question about windows. Not a single question about windows. You get people to draw pictures, you get people to sing songs, you get people to make collages. You can't just ask you'll get an answer if you ask the question, but can you use it? Do you know how to use it?
Okay. Blake, well, I just realised we're coming towards the end of the session. Anybody like to ask a question to any of the panellists at this point? Hopefully that means we're giving you something of interest, but feel free, we've got a few more minutes left. I'll just build on what you were saying there, Blake. Gráinne, do you have the same in Airbus? I mean, how do you look at it at the end customer, or traveller? How do you find out about their needs and wishes for the future?
Well, I think it's a pretty similar approach. I mean, we need to think about not just the customer and what they're wanting today, but what the customer is going to be wanting in 20, 30 years' time. And as Blake has said, asking the direct question doesn't necessarily get you that answer. So you've got to look at it from a lot of different angles to figure out what we can be doing. And also the airlines can help drive us with that as well, because they're a lot closer to the consumer. I think today, both Airbus and Boeing are getting closer to the consumer with the latest generation of aircraft that are out there, with the 350, the 787, the A380, as Jochen mentioned. People know when they're flying these aircraft. They're talking about it. You see it on the net everywhere. I think if you go back 15 years, people didn't really know if they were flying on an A320 or a 737. But we're understanding the customer more, and they're understanding us more as airlines, as airports, as net, as on the net, and also at an aircraft level. So I think that's very, very interesting, and it allows us to get closer to that customer. So we are often, sometimes, for example, on the A380, we've been running some surveys in some of the airports, and we know that customers know when they fly that aircraft. They go out of their way to fly it, and in some cases they're willing to pay more to do that. So that's something that we have to check into, and we have to keep on the map for the future. So when we board in an Emirates A380 in the future, today it's a lounge. You've got a nice lounge in that aircraft. Tomorrow, I'm hoping that lounge is not just a lounge, but if you look forward to holographic technology, for example, in the future, it might be a lounge during one phase of the flight. A couple of hours later, it might be turning into a conference center, a meeting room, where you are connected to the ground to your office, and you're with your colleagues in the aircraft, and you're running a meeting. Some hours later, it might be you're looking at the golf course and you're hitting a few swings, and you're using that same space in the aircraft in multiple functional ways, and you're bringing even more experiences to those passengers. So that's the type of area where you can't just rely on the passenger to tell you that.
What you said about the A380 is interesting. Maybe manufacturers in the past, and obviously not with you guys now, didn't have any idea ultimately about the end customer. It was all about engineering and aircraft, because if I think of a 380, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, you would like more sales of the A380 that you've got, but sure. Emirates, as Jochen said, and Sir Tim Clark says frequently, people want to go on that aircraft. It has a novelty factor even 8 years in, and Willie Walsh from IAG has said they've only got a few 380s, but customers are saying, I went to San Francisco, but I booked a flight, it wasn't a 380. So it's tapping into this knowledge of what people are saying they want it. I do have a question at the back. Have we got the mic? Have you got a mic there? If you could just introduce yourself.
Probably didn't actually tap into that as much as discovered it. It's kind of like which came first.
Right.
I mean, these, the 787, the A380, it's like those products created the pull, and then people are talking about it.
Right, good point.
And now you want to fly on it.
Of course. Okay.
My name is Jeffrey Khater. I'm a CRM consultant. I have just a quick question.
Just try to get a shout a bit. We've got a lot of background noise here.
Yes, CRM consultant. My name is Jeffrey Khater. I have just a quick question to Mr. Jochen Hirsch, mainly. How do you consolidate all of the data that you receive from different channels, such as from the cabin, from the check-ins, from the airport, online, etc., into one, as you said, data lake, for instance, in a structured manner, not for BI purposes, but for actionable data that you can push back to the front end, meaning cross-selling, upselling, personalized campaign and marketing propositions.
Okay. Did you say that was a question you wanted answered by Jochen? I think it could be particularly Jochen and Sarah, I think. Sure. Just to summarize what you said, because it's very hard to hear up here, you're asking how do you get data from many different sources, consolidate it into a meaningful form that is actionable?
Yes, not just business intelligence.
Let's get a quick bit of feedback from Jochen and then Sarah.
It's an excellent question because that's sort of the key problem of the industry really. For the airline alone, as a passenger, you are jumping from a data perspective, from a technology perspective, from one service touch point to the next, right? You're just being passed on like a ball. Because we are so fragmented in our technology, every touch point works in its own data silo. And there are probably 10 to 20 different customer data silos as you pass through the airline experience. So getting our head around how to consolidate that is the key question. But the core systems that sort of pass the data on is the booking system, it's your loyalty scheme, it's the check-in system, and once you tick those big systems of these touch points, you start understanding where the people come from and what they actually do. But the key challenge going forward is deriving a platform where analytics doesn't have to work around the technology constraints rather than working towards a central booking platform where the customer and the utilization of data sits at the heart of the build. So what we set out to do over the next couple of years is completely from the ground up, rebuild our processes, map digital capabilities in those processes, and derive systems that support the execution of those processes, keeping in mind that it's all about consolidating the data and then proactively using those for analytic purposes. And it's not just an analyst sitting down and sifting through vast amounts of big data, rather than having the understanding of the data elements as they come in, so that in real time you can operationalize analytics. So the question, what is the next best thing to do, happens automatically. And machine learning as well as artificial intelligence helps us going into that direction where less and less human intervention shapes the experience rather than the immediate connection between the customer and the system within that chain of services.
Big job on your plate there, Jochen. Sarah, do you want to add to that from an airport point of view?
Actually, we have the same issue, of course, at Munich Airport, but for us, of course, we have all the information about the luggage and things like that, and waiting times as well. But sometimes we have really the issue who are our customers walking around. So at the moment, we have an own project dealing with the customer frequencies and the measurement of the frequencies there. And what we decided is we knew that we had a lot of technologies like Wi-Fi, like RFID, like a whole...
Can we just get the mic down the front? We've got two questions down the front, please.
Yeah. Like beacon infrastructure and technologies like that, but we didn't have an interface between them. And what we did is we invited some startup companies, and we did kind of a startup pitch at the airport. And now they are going to develop a new solution, especially then, how to combine all those technologies at the airport together with the partners. So actually, it's one of our main projects at the moment to deal with that.
Okay, two more quick questions. I know we're pretty well out of time. If you can make it a brief question and we'll get a focused answer, and I'll give your colleague a chance as well.
All right, John, I'll try it as best as I can.
Thanks.
Just a general question to everybody on the panel. Do you see any challenges with the over-reliance on technology? And how is it going to change the employment equation for people working in the airline industry, especially with the advent of artificial intelligence? Do we see the baggage handler changing into a tech specialist too? From the ticket agent, the baggage handler? I mean, how are you seeing the future in that context?
I'm just going to go from right to left with a fairly quick answer. Very important point, but let's just get a quick answer. Blake, do you see employment changing because of all this technological change?
Yeah, I think there's a possibility for that, and I think the thing that I would want to pay attention to on that is as we import more and more stuff to something like artificial intelligence or robotics, what human capabilities are atrophying or are we possibly losing?
Okay, quick word, Jochen.
I'm just saying we haven't seen anything yet. I think we just saw 1% of the digital era. Gartner expects that 60% of the jobs that kids entering primary school right now, 60% of those jobs don't even exist yet. So the transformation that we will see not only in the airline industry but across all businesses and industry is vast. And artificial intelligence, robotics will have a material impact on existing jobs. Some of them won't exist in the future.
Quick words from Grania, Sarah and Mike.
Yeah, pretty similar. I think where that's going to have the biggest impact for us would be on the factory floor, where you have a lot of robotics coming into the manufacturing process. So as has been mentioned already earlier, I think there's going to be a change of the work, the human interaction with that. It doesn't mean that it's any less or more intelligence required, if you like. It's just different. And as Jochen said, there's 60% of the jobs that are not there today. So the kids growing up are going to have a much different way of interacting with these technologies than we know and we have today.
I'm just going to have to cut you there, Grania. Sarah and Mike, anything on this point?
Yes, actually it's the same at the airport, but we always have to think also about not only about the number of people there, but also about their health. So before we test a new technology, we invite our doctors and ask them whether they recommend, for example, to use a Google Glass or things like that. So it's important as well, and you shouldn't forget that.
Yeah, I pretty much echo Jochen. Technology will impact jobs, whether it's, I'm not going to say whether it's going to increase or decrease the number of jobs, but it will impact where those jobs sit in the funnel.
We really are running over time. So did you ask your question? I can't remember. Did you want to ask it? Well, I'll get you to ask very quickly, and I'll get this gentleman to, we'll give comments back to both of you.
Just quick thoughts that comes to mind. Why haven't we seen any innovation in intelligence around boarding planes and seatbelts?
So why haven't we seen innovation in?
Intelligence in boarding planes and seatbelts.
In boarding planes, in terms of seat allocation and so on. Do you want to argue a toss on that one?
Fulfillment. Well, why we haven't seen is a good question, but I think the technology again is there, right? Once you communicate with every single individual on a mobile device and I know where you're going to sit, that nothing would stop us today from calling those people individually through a pop-up note on their mobile. The plane is ready to board for you right now, and it's always the 10 people that should be going next. That's something that should be done, but again, it comes back to legacy systems that have been sitting there for 40 years, determining how we actually run the processes, right? It's a very bottom-up approach of how to design the experience rather than top-down. What is it actually that the customer needs? So we need to move away from the legacy systems, which requires quite a disruptive approach to how the industry is run.
Thanks, John. And the last opportunity for questions to you, sir.
Hi, Wade from Jumeirah Group. There's two questions. As far as the Boeing and Airbus, what are you guys doing about the space, or let's say, personal space for the economy class? Because most of the time, I think one of the experiences that our guests have is that airplane, there's no space is tight on the economy side.
It's a good question. I think, as Blake alluded to earlier, one of the most important things for economy class passenger is exactly that, it's space. I think it's getting better. In Airbus, we very much concentrate on the comfort of the passenger. We like to think about the 18-inch wide seats so that every passenger has that level of comfort. Things like the IFE technology, for example, you no longer have these big seat boxes that are under your feet, so you have the space there. And as Blake alluded to earlier, things like the bigger overhead bins, so you have the space overhead to put that luggage, to put the laptop bag, and to put your coats, etc. So it's really about that. And I think from Blake and from Jochen, it's also
I think it's going to be. I think we're going to see some major changes in the way that's done, because anytime an airframer does something to create more space, or anytime a seat manufacturer, for example, does something to create more space and to provide more living space, essentially the airline, being a business, takes up that space by putting in more seats. Okay, and guess what? That's probably not going to change. Okay, the truth is you can have all the space you want, you just got to pay for it. And so I think some of the things that are going to happen are going to have to do with the physical space is kind of reaching a limit. As far as overall satisfaction within economy, there's kind of a ceiling that you can get to. And I mean, you can talk about seat width if you want, but as it turns out, seat width is a very poor predictor of the overall satisfaction of the experience. So we've talked about the millennials and how they're, in the future, things are going to be processed different. I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see things happen inside the airplane that change our brain and change our perception of what's going on, as opposed to there being any kind of radical space change in the future.
Great. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap the session up there. We've taken it to the wire and beyond today, but I think that was worthwhile, and we can keep the next session on time. Thanks very much to my expert panelists today who've kept me educated and alive. I think all of you have enjoyed it too. Blake Emery from Boeing, thanks for coming. Safe journey home. Also to Jochen, safe journey back to head office a few miles from here. Gronya, thanks for coming on behalf of Airbus. Sarah, thanks for coming on behalf of Munich Airport. And Mike, safe trip back to Scotland from Skyscanner. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. Enjoy the rest of the ATM, and we'll see you in the next year for next year's aviation sessions. Thanks a lot.